We're joined now by a guy that is turned into a warrior of sorts, and I bet he never would have anticipated that would happen. He is Donald Trump Jr., the son of the President of the United States. And if we had gone back in time, first of all, thanks for coming on and getting up with us. But if we'd gone back in time, Donald Trump Jr., and we had said, hey, your dad is going to be the President of the United States, and you will be an active combatant on a day-to-day basis on Twitter, would you have ever believed that was going to be the case? Like, if you were setting odds on that a decade ago, what were the chances that you would have thought this would happen?
I'd have probably said pretty slim, but it's one of those things as you've watched sort of the evolution of our political system and the things that are going on. Man, I'm grateful that he did it, that he stepped up, that he decided to say, hey, I've been throwing some stones from the sidelines for quite some time. Now we actually got to get in the game ourselves. And you can see the results because, honestly, if where we were in 2016 and prior was brought to us by those who are so experienced and know so much, we could use a lot less experience.
Let me ask you this. So the night of the election, and I'm sure you've told this story before, but I just can't even imagine what it's like to be there as the election results start to come in and you realize, hey, we're going to win Florida, we're going to win Ohio, looks like we may win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and all of a sudden that is all kind of coalescing. Did you expect to win that night? Like when you entered into Election Day, you woke up on Election Day morning, what did you anticipate, and what did it feel like as that day progressed? Kind of take me into that experience.
Yeah, well, we weren't going to leave anything on the field, and so I got in from I guess it was New Hampshire at about 2 or 3 in the morning, and my first TV and hits were at 6 a.m. I then did that all morning, and then I started getting on radio, and then in the afternoon we were just basically looking at data throughout the day and seeing where it is. So I was literally just cold calling into radio stations. I think I did 47 radio interviews.
Oh my God.
Between 4 and close of voting, so I sort of worked East Coast to West Coast with the time difference because basically it was 7:30 kind of cut off. So it's like, okay, we're underperforming a little bit here. I'm screaming get me on Sean Hannity. I'm calling these guys that I know. Some of them, on their personal cell phones, they're like, well, we're going off the air. I was like, I don't care. Stay on the damn air. Just get me on. We got to get people out. It was sort of amazing. But yeah, it's 47 or 48 in a 7-hour just straight window that afternoon. So it wasn't like, okay, it's election day, I'll go cast a ballot, and we're done. We weren't done until we were done. And so I did that till basically, sort of 10 o'clock East Coast, which was, 7 o'clock West Coast when everything was pretty much shut down. Then I went to go watch with the family. And, it was interesting, Clay. I didn't have, the normal reaction to, winning. I think when you'd been in sort of the political process, business was just so different. The political side was so vicious, so crazy. So you sort of feel like a caged animal for 2 years of just getting crapped on. There's nothing you can do that's right. There's nothing, And so the emotional frequency, the up-down is every 5 minutes. It's nuts. And so when it was pretty apparent, that we had won, at least on paper, I actually got no joy out of it because I'm like, no. They're going to play some sort of game. They're going to do all the crap, and it turns out I was right. They're going to do all the crap that they claimed, that we were going to do when we were inevitably going to lose. And so when John Podesta got on the stage and said, we'll talk about this tomorrow. Let's see. I was like, there it is. I knew it. These bastards, that's the game they're going to play. They're going to contest it. They're going to do, it turns out they end up contesting it just in a different way for the last 4 years. But, it was sort of funny. I was happier that I sort of nailed it, that I'd figured out the game, as opposed to actually winning, which is pretty sad.
What's wild is, and I don't know if there's been a ton of talk about it, but I'm sure you've started to think about it a little bit, at least in your mind. The way that we're setting up for November 3rd is most people tune in the night of the election and they expect, even if it's late, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. on the East Coast, whatever it might be, that we've got a definite winner by the time that election night is over. The odds of that happening this year, it seems to me, you may disagree, are actually pretty low. I think we're going to have to steel ourselves for potentially weeks of uncertainty, a little bit reminiscent maybe of what happened in 2000 for my listeners who are old enough to remember the Bush v. Gore battle. In your mind, are you kind of steeling up for that as well, in that you're not necessarily going to get a verdict on election night, even though that's kind of the way in our minds we anticipate that we will?
Yeah, my understanding is that the other side, they're basically just staffing up lawyers to try to. I mean, that's where their focus is. I don't think they can win on the merits, but they can win by sort of playing games later on, in my opinion. And so, I imagine they will do whatever they can. You see, sort of the push for the mail-in ballots, like any system that's been proven to be ripe with fraud, the Democrats are all for if they think it can break in their favor. They're on the record saying those kind of things, so you can see the gamesmanship already being played. I don't think they can meet or match our ground game that we've been setting up for a while. There's not much enthusiasm for Biden. So, well, if they can't win there, let's just try to figure out how to do it in the legal battle, and we can staff up there.
I'm expecting that there will be 100 million people plus watching these debates. In other words, I think it's going to be Super Bowl-like in terms of the audience because, as you just mentioned, there's been so much pent-up, inability to go out and campaign. Joe Biden hasn't been able to go out on the road, which probably for his side they're happy about. Your dad.
By the way, there's never been a candidate in the history who him and his team in the history of politics who are thrilled that they have an excuse to stay in their basement, who are thrilled that the American people don't get a chance to see him up close and personal because it never seems to work out when he opens his mouth.
So the flip side, your dad and the Trump campaign would certainly much prefer to be out a lot more active than you've been able to be over the past several months. So all of that sets the table for what I believe will be seismic viewership of the debates. Where will you watch them? Will you be present there physically? Have you even talked about it? And what do you expect to see?
Well, if I can be there physically, I'm obviously going to be there physically. And I mean, they were sort of amazing just to be there. The last time around, when he's delivering the low energy stuff or because you'd be in jail. I mean, my dad's just good at that, and Joe Biden won't be. Now, the reality is this: with the mainstream media the way it is, if Joe Biden shows up, if he collapses in the middle of the debate, the media will say, he did an amazing job. It's incredible what Joe Biden was able to accomplish tonight. He really, put it to Trump. I mean, so if he manages to, just keep it even remotely together, it will be impressive. I've heard, because, I live in New York City. I travel in some interesting circles, and a lot of people I know sort of go in between sort of the circles politically. I mean, I've been told there's an active push to basically make sure that Joe Biden does not show up for the debates because,
at all.
They know he's up for it. I mean, you heard the quote, I guess it was the other day that they said, attributed to Obama, like, basically, don't ever underestimate Joe's ability to just screw something up, drastically. It's one of those things. So, I imagine they're going to do whatever they possibly can to hide Joe Biden. You see it. I mean, they pull him when he's doing a TV interview. Second question. It's not like, they're 25 minutes into the thing. Second question. No, we got to go, because he can't remember the answer. You saw during the debates, the Democrat debates, all of a sudden Joe Biden, well, I don't want to take up any more time, so I'll give back my time. I mean, that has literally never been done. I mean, I've never seen a candidate who's never gone over his time, but you saw he'd ramble for 45 seconds, realize he wasn't even remotely answering the question, forget where he was going all in all, and then it was like, oh, no, I'm a nice guy. I just want to give everyone else a chance to answer, too. It's like, so I hope they happen. I hope he doesn't try to, welch out of them, though I imagine he will, and I've heard there's a big push to do that, and we'll see what happens. But, the reality is this. If he does that, I mean, if you can't take on the guy whose job you want to take, like, how are you going to do against Putin or Xi or, any other dictator around the world? How are you going to do against Iran? It's sort of scary. But, again, he can get the best of both worlds because of the nature of the media and the way that they'll play that.
We're talking to Donald Trump Jr. I tell and I'm sure this is something that you've told your kids as well, I tell my kids, judge me by what you see me do as a dad on a day-to-day basis. They're young, 12, 9, and 5. And I'm sure that when you become a public figure, that's a conversation you have to have with your own kids. I bet it's one that your dad had with you. What do you think people would be surprised to know about your dad, having grown up as his son, that maybe doesn't come through on the public persona?
It's interesting. I mean, I think you see his personality, sort of his sense of humor is pretty amazing.
I think he has a really good sense of humor, but it doesn't seem like it really comes through in the same way. Like, I've heard that from a lot of people, and I thought on our interview last week, he was really pretty funny, and I don't think that it comes through in the same way, right? So you would say, like, your dad privately, pretty good sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, no, he's wild that way. But he also has, I think the major thing that, probably, and it's, his decision to sort of not show it out there, but he actually has a lot more empathy than what he likes to portray. I think, he was brought up by like an old school sort of Germanic guy, lived the American dream, but like never finished high school. Started working when his father passed away.
A physically tough upbringing.
Just a tough, he didn't understand anything other than work. He was very sort of just a primal being that way, right? So, I think my father looks at sort of the empathy side. Like, if I'm going to show that and I'm on a world stage and I'm, he doesn't like showing it because I think he looks at it as though people perceive it as weakness, and it hurts him from being able to negotiate a trade deal with China, for example, or whatever it may be. So, it's interesting. He has that. As we, went through, COVID, if I spoke to him, I get a call back. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, like this is the White House operator, or your father, and he's still in the Oval Office. You know what I mean? He's doing those things and fighting for those guys. I spoke to a friend whose father was older with pre-existing conditions, passed away from COVID. And I was like, he didn't actually know my father, but my father and the guy that passed away were pretty close. And so this is his son, and he goes, your dad called me every day for 3 weeks. I was like, really? He called you every day for 3 weeks? Like, this guy was in tears that, the president of the United States would take, even if it was a couple minutes, just to check in each and every day, of this thing. So, there's that side of him where it exists, but he does not like to show it to the American people or to anyone, and he never has. It's sort of, it's one of those traits it's very prevalent, but the way he looks at it, I wish it would manifest itself more in real life. I think he'd actually help himself out.
We're talking to Donald Trump Jr. Obviously, we have a big audience that is excited for sports to come back, and I've been probably the foremost person in all of sports media out there arguing that sports are important to come back for a sense of normalcy. Growing up with your dad and growing up around sports, as I know you guys did, what does sports mean to your family, and what do you think it means to have sports back in this country to be able to just watch them, put on your television, kick your feet up, and have a beer?
It really is such a just a big part of America, and you're right. I think that's the notion, and I can't tell if some of this stuff's politically motivated because sort of not going back to normalcy allows you to instill some fear that can be used as political leverage. So it's pretty sad what's going on. I mean, you even see a lot of these college athletes. I mean, they don't. It's not like they have a 20-year window to make a career. I mean, they got a small window. You're gonna say, you're gonna say, now I get it. Chances are, if you're a collegiate athlete, you probably don't have too many pre-existing conditions. You could do these things. You can do everything. I mean, you can take the utmost caution, but let them play, man. Let them get out there and do what they do. Let them go. Let them do what they've been training their entire lives to do. And don't squander a year again for a demographic that is, I would imagine, basically as little susceptible as anyone could possibly be. I mean, these are athletes in the peak of their peak physical condition. They're probably fine.
We're talking with Donald Trump Jr., and it's a couple of things. I don't know if you saw the data coming out of Florida, but the data coming out of Florida basically reflects that their outbreak, as it were, is rapidly declining, the data that's been shared by Governor Ron DeSantis. Why do you think the media has ripped the governors of Florida, of Texas, of Arizona? I bet you got a good answer. But also your dad, while they have lionized Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York. You said you're in New York. You spent a lot of time there. New York and New Jersey have twice the death rate of the coronavirus of any country in the world. Florida, Texas, and Arizona have had a pinprick of it, right?
Yeah, and 10 times the total deaths. I mean, it's sort of funny. I put up a meme because it's sort of sports related. It was like, Andrew Cuomo getting up on the podium for being 50 out of 50. And, he's cheering and they're shaking and, it shows him on the podium at 50 out of 50. And it's like, because
literally he's done the worst job Andrew Cuomo has with the coronavirus in the country.
I mean, he killed probably more New Yorkers with just the decision to put the elderly back in nursing homes. The only thing that everyone knew about corona from the outbreak was that basically if you're old and have pre-existing conditions, you're more susceptible. Like, this could actually be pretty dangerous to you, right? And he signs an executive order to send them all back into nursing homes, even if they're sick. Like, that was like 6,000 deaths, I believe. That's more than Florida together, and that's just that one incident. New York's over, 45,000 total. Versus Florida at like 5. I don't understand, but that's the problem. Today's mainstream media, and you've seen this yourself, I'm sure. I mean, they have just abdicated their position as journalists to be activists. So, rather than boast those who, and boost those who have done a good job, hey, we'll boost Andrew Cuomo because, he'll do a press conference during the day where he'll knock Trump, and that's good for us because we hate Trump. And, I mean, it's really insane. It's the same reaction like you have to hydroxychloroquine where, Now there's a Yale study, and there's numerous doctors, and there's a Henry Ford Clinic study that says, hey, this could save lives. You get it to people early, it could save lives. By the way, it's a drug that's been approved by the FDA for 50 years, so it's not like it has bad effects. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone through that process when it did. But the media, because Trump was hopeful that it could maybe work. It could maybe work prophylactically. It could save some lives. This is dangerous. You can't do it. You can't go on it. There's no way. It's a disaster. I mean, how much blood is on their hands for basically taking someone who has since passed that could have gotten on this and whose life would have been saved? Again, just using the statistics from the Yale study or the Henry Ford Clinic study where like literally 50% of the people that got on it were saved. Like it's mind-boggling. But again, we live in a world where the media isn't journalists anymore. They're not journalists. They're activists. And you've seen that. You saw that for 4 years during the Trump administration, where literally there was not one economic metric where we weren't better off than under the Biden-Obama administration before it. And yet you still had 96% negative coverage of Donald Trump. I mean, that's pre-COVID. TDS is real. The Trump derangement syndrome is strong with these people.
Final question for you, and I appreciate the time. We're talking to Donald Trump Jr. When you look ahead to the fall, I know you're going to be speaking at the Republican convention, as it were. What is your role? What do you anticipate doing throughout the fall as Election Day gets closer and closer?
Well, I do what I do best. I may not have a deep toolbox, but when you need a sledgehammer, it's a pretty handy tool. So that's sort of my thing. I took the quarantine time. I took it to actually write a book because, business, you couldn't go into business, you couldn't do anything. I was locked away in my cabin, and I wanted to look into Joe Biden. And I mean, there's a 50-year career. I mean, this guy's been in Washington D.C. for 50 years. You have the family graph, the son, the brother, the this. You have the bad decisions as it relates to China, which seems much more relevant now than even before. But the trade decisions. You have Robert Gates, Obama's own Secretary of Defense, literally saying that Joe Biden's been on the wrong side of every decision he's ever made in a half-a-century career. I mean, there's some amazing stuff, and the media is running him like he's this moderate on the outside. I mean, it's insane. So I actually took the quarantine time. I had 4 months. I hired a researcher. I actually am self-publishing it because I was I wasn't sure I'd actually have time to finish it because I didn't know when these things were going to release. But I thought the American people have to see the other side, the story that isn't being told by the mainstream media, who will, give Biden literally billions in free cover-up and boosting over the next, 80-something days. And so I wrote a book. It's called Liberal Privilege because we get to hear a lot about privilege these days. The one thing they don't talk about is liberal privilege, where you can basically say, do whatever you want. You can flip-flop however many times you want. Your son can take $1.5 billion from China. It's not a problem. These kind of things. And, I just wanted to put it out in there. So I did that. I, put it up on my website. It's donjr.com for those who want to pre-order. It'll be in stores in a few weeks. But for those who want to pre-order, donjr.com, you can check it out there. And really, anyone who's in an independent, even more so, should see this because they're not being told the full story. So my job is to get that full story out there. My job is to force them to talk about the things that they don't want to talk about Joe Biden and his literally half-century failed Washington, D.C. swamp creature career.
Thank you for the time, Don Jr., and we will talk to you again, perhaps on the show as well. Thanks for the time, my man.
Thanks a lot, Clay. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Hey, you too.